Hello, this is Blender Artist and CG Cookie Forum member Nampro, and I'm going to do a quick tutorial on how to rig a speedometer. And this is for Philmister 987, who recently made a post in the Blender Artist forums on he had some issues with making the speedometers work, so I'm going to use an armature and show you how I'd go about doing that. It's going to be a pretty simple and to the point tutorial, so there might not be a lot of explanation on a lot of the things I do, and I apologize before that, but I do want to focus mainly on Philmister's issue with getting those needles to move the correct way without clipping through the dashboard. So first thing I'm going to do is do a little cleanup here and move some items out of my way. So I want to directly, I want to focus on this car. And to do that, I'm going to move some things out of the way to other layers so I can see the interior a little bit better. This looks like a good start. I can see inside the car now and get at that dashboard. So let's put the cursor to the center of the scene, because cursor to center. Alright. Because whenever you add anything in Blender, it always shows up at that cursor point. I'm going to do one thing real quick here. Select everything. Control A. Location, rotation, and scale. Now, I'm not going to take the time on this tutorial to explain why I did that, but at least for Philmister, just note that you need to do it. And I'll explain it again maybe some other time. So let's get this back to the center of our car. So we can look inside. Shift A. Let's add an armature to a scene. Single bone. And let's move it to this layer directly underneath it, just so we can toggle back and forth. Make it a little bit easier to work with. Alright. So we've got our armature object. And let's tab into edit mode. First thing I'm going to do is place this bone to RXX -90. Alright, so now this bone is aligned on the world axis, and this is going to be our root bone. And you also notice that all the meshes were already aligned that way, so root. Now we can start. Let's turn on. Another thing I'm going to do is, if we look at these needles here, we've got the dashboard and we've got the needles, or the gauges themselves. I'm going to split these meshes up just to make it a little bit easier to parent to the bones I'm going to add here in a minute. So let's tab into edit mode, select all, and a few things I like to do is check to make sure that we don't have any doubles in our mesh. If I hit remove doubles, 788 vertices. Alright, so that cleaned up quite a bit. Next thing I like to do is to go to the UV panel here, shading and UVs, and go recalculate normals. Now, I probably didn't. Let me undo that for a second and actually show you where you can see what's going on here. If I click this normals display button here, and that's the faces, and you get all these big spiky things, and it's pretty obnoxious. So let's move these down a little bit. Now, what a normal is, it's the direction of the face, a polygon face, and you want them pointing the right direction. So let me just select them all now and calculate them. I didn't see any movement there, so everything was good. Alright, next thing I want to do is, let me turn that display type off, it's kind of annoying, and turn to vertex selection. I want to take a vert here and a vert there, and Control L, and that will select everything that it's connected to. And with hotkey P as in parent, I'm going to separate by selection. Let's rename that new mesh to tack. Now, we've still got these two pieces are connected. We're going to do the same thing. one vertex there, one vertex there, Control L, P by selection. Now let's rename that speedometer. And finally this one, gas gauge. Alright, this is just going to make it a little bit easier when you add these bones. So let's see. One of the first things I want to do is I want to add a bone that's directly in the center of this gauge knob here. I'm going to select this edge loop, Shift S, cursor to selected, and that put my 3D cursor right there. Next I have to tab into edit mode of the armature, and when you hit Shift A, it's going to add that bone at that point. So let's take this top and scale this down on Z axis so it's not so obnoxiously large. Alright, I'll show you a couple different methods here to snap bones to positions. And in rigging, how a bone's oriented in space is pretty important. So I'm going to switch to edge selection here because I want to get this very end one. Shift S, cursor to selected. Now that I've got that cursor where I need it, I can tab back into edit mode of the armature and take the head of this bone, or tail. This is actually the head of the bone. This is the tail, and I'm Shift S, selection to cursor, and you can see it snaps it to that position. Now, one of the issues that FilmMister had was trying to get everything aligned here, so it wouldn't clip through the dash. And in order to show you what's going on, how to fix those issues, we need to turn on axis display, and then I'm also going to turn on X-ray just so I can see the whole bone through the mesh if I need to. Now with axis display on, the way I'm going to set this up is I'm going to use the X-axis as a rotation, so it's basically going to act as a pin. So Control R, I'm going to roll this bone so that we actually get to a... Alright, I want that axis to be perpendicular to the dashboard, and that looks about right as far as my calibrated eye says. So let me tab into pose mode quick, and let's do a couple more things. First off, this gauge bone isn't going to be needed for location, so let's just lock that. Next, it's only going to rotate on one axis, so quaternions don't make sense for that. We're going to turn it to X, Y, Z rotation, and we're going to lock the Y in Z rotations. Now, you can see that it'll move on X, but if I type RY, it won't move, and RZ, it also won't move. So there we are. It's constrained to the X axis. And because we've got the roll set right, it's going to spin around the correct way, and it won't intersect with the dashboard. Alright, if we look at it this way, there we go. Simple, right? The only thing else we need to do is we just need to select, no, it's harder to do, we need to select this tachometer mesh piece, and then shift select the bone in pose mode, Control P, and select bone. Now when I rotate this in pose mode, the gauge goes with it. Next, let's do some other things here, which is let's actually give it the bone name so it makes sense. Let's call this tack, and let me just select this one, shift duplicate again, and then I'll show you a few different ways to this one's going to be speedometer, and this one will be gas gauge. Did I spell that right? There we go. Alright. Well, this isn't a spelling tutorial, so here we go. Alright, same thing. I'm going to select this mesh. Try to get this edge loop. Shift S. Cursor to selected. And then I can just, in pose mode, select this whole bone. Shift S. Selection the cursor. Now instead of re-entering edit mode and selecting that edge like I did on the other one, I'm going to show you another method here where if I turn on this option, this is a snapping option, and turn it to face selection, and turn on this option to project individual elements on the surface of other objects, I can actually then just grab this and snap it. You see it's kind of snapping around from to that location. Isolate this a little bit. Alright, now that's snapped to the edge of that, or the tip of that gauge. Next we need to roll it like the other one. So that looks pretty good right there. And let's just go to the next one. Shift S, cursor to selected. Shift S, selection to cursor. And with snapping on again, I'm just going to grab this, snap it to that edge. A little nicer doing it this way than constantly in and out of edit mode here. Now I'm going to turn off snapping now that it's in position and roll this around so the x-axis is facing that dashboard there and it's perpendicular. So nice thing too about I must not have locked all these axes. I want to do the scale axis too because we don't want to accidentally animate the scale of that. Now, pretty simple. I'm going to select the speedometer mesh, select the speedometer bone, Control P, bone, it's parented. There we go. And the same thing here. Select the gas gauge and gas gauge bone, parent it, and there you have it. A very, very simple rig speedometer set. Speedometer, tachometer, and gas gauge. Now, the next question is what else do we want this to do? And if we want this part of a larger mechanism, so you don't have to, as an animator, come in here and let's say rev your tach up to a certain point in your speed. So I'm going to leave it up to Filmister 987. Everybody always picks these perfect names that are not tongue twisters whatsoever for form names. Appreciate it. I'm just kidding. So I hope this helps. Maybe in another tutorial I can actually go through and rig the rest of this and show you a full work flow. But for now, I hope this helps you, Filmister 987, and this is Dan Pro out.